The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, opened up with the Galadriel voiceover just like the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring. The very first words of the entire show were, quote, "Nothing is evil in the beginning." They chose those words for a reason. We are going to refer back to this quote in this video as well as tomorrow's episode 2 video. Let's start by talking about the timeline. The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings take place in what is known as the Third Age. This new show takes place in the Second Age with one exception. The very first scene of the show took place in the First Age when Galadriel was just a child. Galadriel did not live on the continent of Middle-earth. Instead, she lived out in the far west over the Sundering Sea in the land of Valinor. At this time, the sun and the moon didn't even exist yet. Instead, the light of the world came from two magical trees called the Two Trees of Valinor. Unfortunately, the first Dark Lord destroyed those trees, bringing shadow to the world literally and figuratively. His name was Melkor, or Morgoth. Morgoth went over to Middle-earth, and a legion of elves followed him there. Eventually, they defeated him, but the war lasted centuries, and it left the world in ruin. Most of the land that was Beleriand sunk into the sea. Moreover, orcs had spread to every corner of Middle-earth, serving Morgoth's most devoted servant, a cruel and cunning sorcerer named Sauron. Galadriel's brother Finrod vowed to find and destroy Sauron, but Sauron found him first. Sauron killed Finrod, and his flesh was marked by a mysterious symbol. Galadriel took up her brother's mantle. She became commander of the northern armies, and they hunted Sauron for centuries. Let that sink in. They hunted Sauron for hundreds of years. Over that time, more and more of the elves began to believe that Sauron was but a memory, but not Galadriel. She feared that he was still out there. Galadriel and her troops scaled an icy mountain up in the north, and they found a long-lost stronghold. That stronghold was the place where the orcs had gathered after Morgoth's defeat. While they were there, they found two things of note. First off, they noticed a skeleton attached to a wall by some substance. Galadriel said that the orcs had been meddling with the powers of the unseen world, a dark sorcery of old. So that is the first major takeaway. The orcs were using a dark sorcery in an attempt to do something, and Galadriel could not figure out what their purpose was. The second thing that she noticed was the mark of Sauron. Galadriel determined that he had been there, so she wanted to continue further north. Unfortunately, the rest of her troops voted to turn back. As a result, they all went back home to Lindon. Lindon is the strip of land on the northwestern edge of Middle-earth west of the Arid Luin mountain range. To put it into perspective of places you might be familiar with from the Third Age, Mordor is down here. Rohan and Saruman's tower at Isengard are here, and the Shire is all the way up here. As you can see, Lindon is on the coast of Middle-earth west of the Shire. When Galadriel got back to Lindon, Elrond was very excited to see her since they are good friends. Galadriel showed Sauron's mark to Elrond and told him that she intended on asking the king for a new company so that she could continue hunting Sauron. Unfortunately, even her good friend Elrond thought that that was a bad idea. He warned her that, in his opinion, her company hadn't defied her, but rather she had defied her High King by overstepping her authority. Elrond also told her that the king was going to honor her regardless, and he did just so. High King Gil-galad held a ceremony, and he gave a speech which Elrond appears to have written since he was mouthing the words. Gil-galad claimed that Galadriel and her company had proved beyond any doubt that their days of war were over. Galadriel clearly wanted to object to that since she did not agree, but she resisted for the time being. She bent her head down and let him put a crown on her as part of the ceremony. Gil-galad offered her and her company an incredible gift. He told them that they were going to be escorted back across the sea to the far west, to the undying lands of Valinor, where they would dwell for all eternity. As a reminder, that is where Galadriel is from. She left Valinor during the First Age when they went to war against Sauron's boss, Morgoth. Some of the elves, including Elrond, had never been to Valinor. For many, it is a dream to go there someday. In other words, High King Gil-galad's gift was a big one, a very big one. That is why Galadriel's companions were pleasantly surprised. It also speaks to how brave and selfless Galadriel is that she wanted to stay on Middle-earth and keep looking for Sauron as opposed to living for eternity over in Valinor. Later that night, Elrond approached her in front of her brother's statue. She told him that she had always expected her likeness to be carved there as well someday. In other words, she had always expected to die searching for or fighting against Sauron. Long story short, Galadriel told Elrond that she planned on refusing High King Gil-galad's gift. Instead, she planned on going north, alone if she must, claiming that the evil was out there, waiting for them to get complacent. Since he cared about her, this frightened Elrond for a couple reasons. First off, Elrond pointed out that no one in history had ever refused the call to Valinor. He warned her that if she refused the call now, it may never come again. So that was the first potential problem with her staying. Elrond was also just worried about her as a friend. He told her that she had already fought long enough and pleaded for her to put up her sword and go west where she could heal. He asked her to do this as his friend, and he promised her that if she was right about Sauron, he would handle it. In the end, she agreed. She got on that boat and they sailed west to her home of Valinor. Now, let's go east to the Harfoots and Rovanian. The Harfoots are a community of nomadic little people. Marigold and Largo Brandyfoot have a child named Eleanor, or Nori, and Nori is different. With almost a tear in her eye, Nori told her mother that she wants to see the wonders of the wide world, and when she walked away, her mother's look spoke volumes. It might only be a matter of time before Nori goes off on her own, and if she ever does, she might be joined by her friend named Poppy. The Harfoots are very good at sneaking around and hiding, so the two hunters did not notice them, but a wolf did. Long story short, it was odd that the travelers had arrived at this time of year, and it was odd that there were so many wolves around. As a result, Nori wondered if there were troubles down south. And there were. During the wars of the First Age, some humans in the Southlands fought on the side of Sauron's boss, Morgoth. As a result, High King Gil-galad set up outposts to monitor the descendants of those humans. Arondir was stationed at one of those outposts. He spent the last 79 years down there on patrol. Arondir's boss is the Watch Warden named Revian. Revian is prejudiced against everyone in the Southlands based off of what their ancestors had done. That is a nod to the very first line of the entire show. Nothing is evil in the beginning. New Southlanders are born innocent, yet they are treated like the other due to the choices of their ancestors. As expected, many of them don't appreciate that. Theo's friend named Rowan got in Arondir's face at the tavern. Rowan aggressively asked Arondir when the elves were going to let the past go. Rowan also told Arondir that their true king would return and pry them out from under their pointy boots. That was a very interesting line which could pay off in a couple ways. In theory, some long-lost hero may return, but that might be wishful thinking. If, or rather, when Sauron returns, he might set up shop at Mordor. He might declare himself the king, and since the elves have treated the Southlanders like the others, the Southlanders might side with Sauron. Arondir is an elf, so he is immortal unless he gets killed in battle. There's actually one other way in which he could die. Love. Although he is immortal, he appears to have fallen in love with a human who is not immortal. In order to spend his life with her, he might have to give up his immortality. The woman is a healer named Bronwyn, who has a son named Theo. Theo's father is no longer around, but it is unclear why he left and whether or not he is still alive. Theo found his sword under the floorboard, so there is a chance that his father stored it there. Since that sword had the mark of Sauron on it, Theo's father might be a servant of Sauron. Or maybe the exact opposite. Only time will tell. When Arondir showed up to their house, Theo asked his mother why one of them was there. So Theo is prejudiced against elves like others within his community. To make matters worse, Rowan told Theo that the entire town was talking about his mother and Arondir. So Theo has more than one reason to dislike Arondir, and now Theo has a seemingly evil sword. The sword came to life, seeming to almost speak to Theo. The mark of Sauron became inflamed. You can see the mark lit up in the reflection of Theo's eye, and a moment later it was gone. So trouble is brewing in the Southlands. Nevertheless, High King Gil-galad sent word down to Arondir's outpost and told him to disband. As a result, Arondir went to visit Bronwyn one last time. While he was there, Treadwell showed up with a sick cow. Treadwell told him that the cow had gone grazing out east, so Arondir and Bronwyn went on a little journey to her hometown of Hordern. According to Arondir, the residents of Hordern had been loyal servants of Sauron's boss, Morgoth. When they got to Hordern, the town was on fire. And now, the ending. While Galadriel sailed west to Valinor, Gil-galad introduced Elrond to Celebrimbor, the greatest of elven smiths. Gil-galad told Elrond that he would be helping Celebrimbor with a very important project. Meanwhile, Galadriel sailed west of Valinor. When they got there, she had a flashback of her brother. As a child, Finrod told Galadriel to follow the light. Galadriel countered by saying that sometimes there are tricks that may lead one astray. She asked him how she was to know which light to follow. Finrod responded by telling Galadriel that sometimes they cannot know until they have touched the darkness. He ended by telling her to trust her instincts, and she did just so. Galadriel jumped off the boat so as to swim back to Middle-earth. As she did that, two other things happened. First, a sick leaf fell off of one of Gil-galad's trees, suggesting that a darkness had returned. Second, a mysterious man fell to the earth like a comet. As a reminder, Gil-galad had admitted to Elrond that Galadriel was right, that the evil wasn't gone forever. However, Gil-galad and others had foreseen and worried that if Galadriel had continued her search, she might have inadvertently kept alive the very evil whom she sought to defeat. So it raises the question, did Galadriel inadvertently bring back Sauron when she chose to dive off of that ship? That might have been a misdirect. After all, the two hunters had already traveled through Rhovanion at a time of year when they normally would not do so. Theo had already begun to hear things under the floorboards of his house, and the cow had already gotten sick. In other words, things had already begun to change. So, if the stranger isn't Sauron, then who is he? Gil-galad tried to send Galadriel to Valinor, despite the fact that he admitted to Elrond that Galadriel was right. The shadow was still out there. Gil-galad claimed that he had a good reason. He told Elrond that they had foreseen Galadriel inadvertently keeping alive the very evil she sought to defeat. Elrond responded by saying that it is hard to see what is right when friendship and duty are mingled. A similar concept was explored in the very first scene. Galadriel told her brother that sometimes the lights shine just as brightly reflected in the water as they do in the sky. In other words, some lights are an illusion. As a reminder, Sauron is a dark lord, but he has the ability to take on other forms and whisper into the ears of powerful people such as High King Gil-galad. That may be why they kept Elrond out of the last council session, and that may also be why they sent Galadriel away. Sauron might be one of High King Gil-galad's advisors.
He is about to embark on a new project, one of singular importance. And we've decided that you will be working with him.